Next-gen game security and how to protect your players. Incredibly important, not least if you take into account that we've had so much regulation hitting us recently. Things like the Online Safety Act is an incredible challenge. To my mind, it's not an Online Safety Act, it's a let's create more barriers for small developers to make their lives harder with no actual benefit to consumers. But then I'm biased. I'm not a big believer that we made a good choice in the way that act was implemented. Anyway, I think hopefully Brian's. Are you good? Are you ready to kick off?
Are these on?
These are on. Go for it, Brian.
Thanks very much, Oscar. So it's a really interesting topic, and we're really grateful that you guys have invited us to talk about this. As Oscar says, it's going to be about player security, about next-gen security, but also before we start all of that, we're going to explore a little bit about why. I thought maybe the kind of the ethics of it or the morality of it would be an interesting place to start. I also thought that it would be easy just to give a quick intro to our panel members rather than kind of spending lots of time, because I think the topic is super exciting. At the end, Richard Smith is here, and Richard is a director of DataTheorem. And DataTheorem is a company that helps mobile game studios protecting their players, the games, the revenue from cheating, from fraud, and from tampering, fundamentally. DataTheorem also comes from the cybersecurity world, and they've been recently seeing a real need in the video games world to apply a lot of their cyber security practices in the games world. And Richard's been really leading a lot of that as a director and working with games companies all over the world on their economies, their monetization strategies, anti-cheat technology, mobile fraud prevention, all kinds of great stuff to help you guys. Next then, we have Hege, who's the CEO and co-founder of Aiba. And Aiba effectively is an AI-powered platform called Amanda, which is a really cool name, and it detects harmful players. It detects behaviors like harassments and bullying and cyber grooming, kind of in real time with built-in compliance, but also really targeting the behavior of people. Hege herself is about 20 years in tech ventures or so, which is amazing, combining your AI, your community knowledge, your behavioral sciences knowledge, as well as cybersecurity and protection. So thank you for coming. And then Nick, quite wonderfully, Nick Tannahill is the studio head at Firefly Studios. And Firefly Studios is part of the Devolver group, so it's wonderful to have Nick here. And effectively, it's about 25 years of experience working with PC mobile titles on historical real-time strategy games. Most of you probably played the Stronghold series and Stronghold Kingdoms with well over 12 million registered players across the world. And Nick, as the studio head, effectively is the one helping to grow and create games like Stronghold and others for great player experiences. So welcome, guys. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. So let's start with why. I think in some of our conversations we were thinking, well, is protecting our players, can we be cynical and say it's about money? Mm-hmm. Can we say, well, actually, we're afraid because the law is coming after everybody, hence why a lawyer is hosting this, or we just think it's the right thing to do? I think maybe Nick, to start with you, I think you had some interesting ideas around communities. If you could share some of that.
Yeah, I mean, sorry, way too close to the mic there. Our approach essentially is to announce our games at the point of which we have something playable. We run extensive surveys with our players to give them a realistic expectation of what to expect, and they see the fancy trailer, but then they can go play the demo pretty much the same day. I think we did on our last title. But essentially, we try to avoid toxicity by giving people a full rundown of what the game actually is, because we find that quite a lot of toxicity sometimes comes from people misunderstanding what the game is and thinking, oh, it should be X, Y, and Z. So if you tell them exactly what it is right up front, arguably you lose some people from the sort of the funnel at that point, but it means that those remaining are your fans, your champions, and they're armed with knowledge to defend you. And they're just happy to be there, and you don't have the naysayers in there, or you have fewer than you would otherwise have. So that's kind of our community approach. And I mean, in some ways, we're almost too transparent to begin with. You know, we do silly things like ask people how much they would pay for the game, and you know, to some people that might seem insane, but for us, it works really well. It gives us a realistic expectation of what they want, what we want, and then that reduces toxicity overall.
And Hege, as a founder of Aiba, does this motivate kind of why you started the company? I know when we spoke before, you were alluding to retention, about how retention can be very powerful, and there are lots of different kinds of motivations for retention. Does that get to the why? Is retention? Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I would say yes to everything you asked for in the beginning. Like, yeah, it's the right thing to do, obviously. When we look into the world today, we see that there are so many young people that struggles in their lives. They need a safe space, and many of the young people, kids, they come to video games to relax and have a good time, but many of them experience not having a very good time. So we should be careful and try to do our best to provide them the best possible way to be a teenager or a kid or an adult. But also we see that happy players, they're spending so much more money into the game. And we saw in a US study, the nice games actually had almost double as much revenue as the toxic ones, because the players, they didn't come back. They decided to go somewhere else. So I think it's good for both your feeling inside, but also for your revenue, I would say.
Yeah. And Richard, there's still no getting around the legal landscape. I mean, when DataTheorem's starting its work in cybersecurity, in fintech, in health tech, and looking across at gaming, the legal landscape is growing.
Yeah, I mean, when we first, our company's been around for a long time in the mobile space, but really with those types of verticals, right? So gaming is somewhat new for us, right? We worked with some very large AAA studios for some time who had, the investment dollars and are in everything when it comes to gaming. But we've really been only focused on the mobile gaming side of things really over the last 11 months. And so we're learning a lot. But I think what's happened is the things that we've historically seen in the finance and some of these other worlds, that stuff's now starting to make its way into mobile gaming as we continue to see such incredible growth in the space. For example, right, GDPR now considers Android ID a piece of PII, right? So if you're collecting that, you may not realize, one of your advertising SDKs may be doing something, or you may not have that visibility. We're having to notify some of our early adopters that, hey, you are collecting this type of information. If you don't update your privacy policy, now you can be hit with regulatory fines, right? This isn't something, if you had asked me 5 years ago when we were looking at this space, there's no PI being collected by games. There's no transactions being handled directly by any one particular studio. But as we're now seeing some of that things change right now, okay, we're going to look at other ways to monetize outside of the traditional ways we've seen in mobile games. Now we're starting to introduce things that are going to be now scrutinized by some of these other regulatory factors as well. And so I think, obviously that's one aspect of what we're looking at, but I do think it comes back to, treating players right and fairly and having that. And so the other thing we look at is, okay, well, how do we make sure, especially in certain types of games, this doesn't apply to necessarily every type of game, but if you think about a first-person shooter or some of these types of games, if people don't feel like they have a fair shot or it's a competitive space they're going to have, retention and ultimately impacting revenue, right? So we want to make sure that you can't create that mod, right? You can't take those advantages, that we're doing things to mitigate those issues within those games and ultimately driving a fair play experience.
Does the panel think that there's a correlation between an increased awareness of cheating and bad behavior and toxicity and fraud, or has it always been happening and we're better at detecting it, or is it both? So, hey, you founded a company to focus on this. Are we more aware? Has it always been happening, or is it happening more and we're also more aware?
Well, it has always been happening. But what we do now is we see it more because we talk about it more. And the news press, they also share stories. But also, and this is like from us building a company out from EU, there are so many regulations to take into account, like you were talking about GDPR, but also there's the Digital Services Act coming. and so on, so on. But one thing we know is that the bad actors that want to make harm into communities, if there are predators who wants to groom a child, or there are fraud actors, they don't care about regulations. They use everything. So, yeah.
And Nick, as a developer, when you are, this is the lawyer's awful way to say this, but when you're typing on your keyboard and you're beginning to develop the game,
You type on your keyboard as well.
I do type. That's all I do. That's all I do basically. But when you're when you're actually road mapping and putting the milestones together and building it, are these kinds of activities in the plan, or as you began your opening comments around the community, are you more focusing on the community, or are you also building in mechanical, engineering, structural things in games that can help reduce fraud and cheating and so forth?
Yeah, I think we learn every single time we put out a new game, things we could be doing better. So at a baseline, we're just thinking about the game concept when it comes to internal pitching, and then we bring it to the leads and the team. That'll be one sanity check when we're going, okay, what is there? What are the dangers from a community perspective? What did we see on our last game? Because generally speaking, like you mentioned Strong Kingdoms earlier, that's a game that's built for massively multiplayer gameplay. But every single time we do a game, it will usually have multiplayer in some form. So we learn something every single time. So really, I think it's the point at which we are, I say pitching internally, we try to give everyone a say basically in what kind of game we're making. And when it comes to contact with the community team and the marketing team, that's really our sort of moment in time when we go, okay, what did we learn from last time? And every single time we add multiplayer, depending on scale, doesn't really matter. We learn something every time, and that's kind of the point at which we make those decisions. So it's pretty early on, I'd say, sort of start of the R&D period.
And Richard, when you're working with companies then, and you're bringing DataTheorem's platforms and products in to help companies, are you connecting with things that the companies have in their apps already, or are you running alongside, or is it both?
Yeah, I mean, I think the topic that we hear the most that they're dealing with that is the topic that nobody has really figured out is fraud, right? And it sounds like it's always been there, and everybody that I've talked to in this space has a different version of fraud. And so it seems like it's a very pervasive problem that hasn't been figured out. So I think that's where we've had the most alignment. Now we handle it from the client side and understanding, is the user behavior that we're seeing in the game truly genuine, right? Or is this indicative of somebody who's not a real human behavior, right? And so that can lead to a lot of things that can start to manipulate what's going on within a lot of aspects of the game, right? Especially if you're thinking about things like user acquisition and the costs associated with that, and other things if you're coming at it from the developer, the studio side of things, obviously. But that's where we've seen kind of the biggest problem that has kind of gone, everybody knows they have it, but they haven't really figured out exactly what it means for them. But it's the consistent issue, right? So I think that's the one area we've seen the most conversations start. And it's something that we are kind of bringing from what we've traditionally done, because fraud, as you can imagine, in the financial space is a major issue, right? And it's extremely highly regulated. So we're bringing a lot of that expertise into it, say, hey, here's what we traditionally would see as fraud within mobile, right? And then how does that applicable to what you're dealing with? Now, I'm not gonna pretend that we know everything yet. We've been here for 11 months realistically. So I think we're still learning quite a bit of the challenges that everybody's facing, but we're seeing a lot of the same problems that these industries have been through for a number of reasons for a long time, now starting to emerge in a number of different ways within the gaming space.
And that picks up on some of the comments in our meetings earlier about offensive versus defense. This concept of historically, I think all three of you guys observed that maybe leading up to today, companies were reactive. Companies were acting defensively as a way to ensure that fraud didn't happen, if you like, or preventing bad behavior as it was arising. But you're seeing a slight shift, or at least maybe the three of your companies, you're trying to educate people to shift towards an offensive approach, to build a forward. I think, hey, that was in one of your comments, was this defense versus offense. Maybe if you could elaborate on how you're helping on that.
Yeah, so we, like our clients, they have historically been running after the problems, like, oh, shoot, here's a problem. Now we have to fix it. Oh, here's another one. And it's very, very stressful. But here I think like everyone is talking about AI. Sorry about bringing that up. But this is where AI really could shine, where we can train the models to pick up on those behavioral signals super early, so they can be detected super early, so we can prevent the harm from happening. If it's fraud, well, I think like grooming is a kind of fraud. It's like someone trying to manipulate to get to their goals, into getting information, money, whatever. So yeah, I really think that we are now about to stop the harm before it happens, and that will be a major shift in the industry.
And if large language models and AI is being used to help solve the problem, at least create a platform where the problem can be solved, it almost invites the thought of an arms race, that then fraudsters are also using AI. And I think Richard, in one of your comments, you mentioned about, again, from the lessons you learned in other industries that you're now applying to games, fraudsters are smart and they get better and better. So I mean, does that start feeling like an arms race?
You know, coming from the cybersecurity space, it's always been that, right? I mean, as you get better at defense, they're going to get better at offense, right? So it's a ever-evolving game, and AI, even in the cyberspace, is something that has been a huge problem because now AI is going to be used to conduct attacks, right? So you're going to need to use AI to defend from it, right? It's something we deal with on the other sides of what we do in our business. So it is definitely something that's going to be, I think, really important to making sense of the events, right? There's going to be so much data, and the data sets that we're already getting just from every user event, every activity that we're seeing from, you know, if you think about games with 10, 50 million active monthly users, that's a massive amount of data that we're going to be ingesting from all those devices connecting and all that. To make sense of what would be something like fraud or behaviors that we don't want to see, you're going to have to use some kind of AI realistically to be able to scale up with that and to make sense of it, right? We're already seeing that happening just in how we address cyber attacks now. So yeah, I absolutely think it's going to be a big part of what we have to deal with.
I think even the most sort of like ardent, opposed person to AI would, you know, if you talk to someone who's been in a community team for like an MMO, and they're like, leadership are like, oh, can you set up a Discord for this, like, this MMO that has between 100,000 monthly active users and millions, and they just go, you know what that's going to turn into, right? So like Discord bots at that point were an amazing tool. So this is not really, as long as it's not stealing from anyone and the training data is, you know, local to the company, I mean, that just seems like an evolution of those really, which were amazing tools, which completely changed the game in terms of community management.
Yeah.
And picking up on community management, Nick, then one of the things, again, that you brought up was around education, about making sure that staff who are working in community management, maybe your Discord mods, maybe the kind of people who are generally connected to the game, perhaps either as full-time employees or even just kind of loosely connected with the wider community, are educated well on how to handle things, what to say. Is there, in addition to this AI arms race, my words, I know you guys didn't say that, but is there also a human education race about making sure people are trained well and geared up on how to handle this?
Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, it's just, you know, you've got to arm people with information, and the more aligned they are with what you're making, the less likely they are to be toxic, and the more they know, the more they can share that information for you, because like, you don't want to be the person, you know, sort of bring that information up, right? You can't, no matter how big you are, no matter how big your marketing team is or your budget team is, you're never going to reach every player with all the information that you want to reach them with, so you have to arm people. And yeah, I don't think anyone's like, we're not against anyone in that race. It's like, yeah, no one's waging disinformation wars on us yet. So I think it's just kind of just do the work and make sure, you know, you're talking internally about it as much as possible, and then at the point of reveal, making sure you're as free with information as you can be within the confines of the marketing plan.
And do you guys see studios taking different approaches? I know one of the topics we were looking at is we were going kind of past, present, and future. And present, each of you had a slightly different observation as the things you're seeing. So, for instance, Richard, you were observing that there are different studios who are taking an approach about accepting certain kinds of levels of responsibility for managing fraud, for managing disinformation, how they are either working with partners like DataTheorem or kind of taking steps themselves, versus other companies maybe that think that the platform should handle it or so forth. Are you coming across different approaches?
Yeah, I mean, I would say everybody's at different levels depending on, at least from what we're learning, what their game, like what type of game they're dealing with, you know, how big their game platform is at some point. You know, if you look at some of the original folks we started working with years ago, they actually don't really care about cheating, right? And you would think, oh, okay, well, yeah, you know, they only care if it impacts revenue, right, at the end of the day. So, you know, and then other studios, they do care about the fair play of the game, right? And because they need the retention, and that's more important for them at this stage where they're at. So I think we're seeing, depending on where where the game is or where that studio is in its adoption, or the overall, publisher or studio's ability to draw in a very large audience, how they've gone about doing that and how much what they care about does shift, right? And what they can tolerate, right? They can tolerate a much different level of attrition, or they may not even see it realistically at all and have an impact bottom line.
And hey, does that then also lead to training to the companies you work with? Like when the kind of specific acute work you're doing on a specific project with a studio is kind of, you've done the work you need, are you leaving companies with some like training or education or something about how they can go for, like, are you leaving them with how to defend themselves or offense themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think we had this conversation about most people are nice. And also that we admit that most people are nice. Most people, when they come into your game, they want to do nice things. But if you have some bad apples, the rest of the apples will also turn a little bit worse. And I think that's a good insight, because then you also know that most people come into your game to have a good time. And also understanding that asking the players in your game, why are you here? And also try to educate your players, because especially with the kids games we've been working on, the kids themselves, which was very toxic, they didn't realize it because there were no grown-ups in the room. But when someone told them, like, when you are acting like this, other ones might find you harmful. They were like, oh, really? Well, and then they changed the behavior. So also, this is more about how do we want the communities around to be? Yeah.
Yes, sometimes when you're managing communities, you do feel like a bit of a parent. Because you're like, I know someone not told you that you can't do this. And it was really illuminating when you said about, I think fruit is a really good analogy as well. You put something that's overripe there, it'll affect all the other ones. But yeah, you just feel like you're doing a bit of parenting, a bit like, I imagine teachers feel this way when they're talking to their students.
Corporate lawyers.
And corporate lawyers, yeah.
But that community just keeps coming up now. So in our time sitting here together, as well as our discussions earlier, this sense of community just keeps coming up over and over again. You think are there analogies between the different kinds of platforms? So, like Devolver and Firefly principally are kind of PC platforms, but also lots of mobile, obviously. But then also, we've been listening to people this week on talking about their brands and brand protection, and we just heard people talking about movies and so forth. I wonder if there are analogies between the brand, the community, the perception that also has an impact on things like fraud and honesty and so forth. Richard, do you have a thought whether it's a connection?
Actually, when you mentioned that, it brings up something that we've actually dealt with in the mobile space for a long time, right? So, especially in brand. So, for example, it's very easy to go take a game, pull it right off the App Store, and then make a mod, right? And then wrap it and do something with it, and then republish it somewhere else, right? So we have a particular studio who's dealing with that challenge right now. If they realize if the game does not isn't downloaded directly from Apple or Google stores, they will present an alert to you that we help them identify and deliver that says, hey, this was not downloaded from, we're not going to allow this to run, right? Because they can't trust the situation. And the types of things that we've seen in this, and we see this a lot across the entire space, is people will go download these, they'll push them up to third-party stores. They have absolutely no problem accepting them because their viability depends on them having lots of things. They'll maintain old versions of games and apps that we don't want to see out there that might have things that we no longer want to be maintaining in there. And then they'll do things like wrap it with ad injection, or and then all of a sudden now the brand is experiencing a poor user experience because they think this is coming from the brand, when reality is it's Bob who downloaded it and published it as Bob, right? And not your studio who has put this up there and is doing this to do a quick cash grab. Your brand takes the hit for it, and we've seen this historically happen with a lot of retailers and other things like that in the mobile space, and now we're starting to see that become a challenge even within the gaming space, where they're using your brand in order to deceive a user to make a quick dollar and walk out, right?
So I wonder if that's going to add to my short list of why. If why is it's the right thing to do, the legal landscape is expanding and deepening and strengthening, it makes financial sense, and then also to protect your brand, which is, right, of course, related to financial.
It can be everything in
It's going to be all those things. When we were also kind of in the lead up to this panel discussion, I asked you guys to predict the future. So that's not a nice thing to do, but each of you did, so I appreciate that. So we'll start with and maybe we'll start with Nick. I think
Can't remember what I said now.
you were predicting about your words, the superpower of the community, as the answer going forward. Happy communities willing to defend against antisocial behavior, that thing. Do developer studios now when you're doing your milestones and doing your roadmap, is having a strong, robust, engaged community now becoming bigger and bigger and bigger as part of the milestones, or is it just something that happens anyway? Or
Yeah, no, I think it is becoming a much bigger priority. We think more from and internally, I think some developers might see this as like a marketing priority, when really it's more product focused. But it's becoming a massive point in time for us, especially considering that pretty much with Steam Next Fest and all these other opportunities, a lot of developers scheduled are now, basically the games are just scheduled around these marketing opportunities, and a lot of those are related to letting you see the game, warts and all, at whatever point in the marketing cycle you need, basically. So really, we look at the point of reveal as like, yes, that's the point at which we need to solidify the community and strengthen it and give it all the information it needs, and also give people everything they want. So if there are like loads of low-hanging fruit in terms of features, just throwing those in there so people can feel like they're being listened to, and that has a huge positive effect on how they view our games and how they talk to other people about our games. And really, word-of-mouth marketing is like, it was important 5-10 years ago. Now it's like absolute gold dust in terms of the mobile world and PC as well.
And Hege, you predicted the future by talking about tools, about giving people the I think the phrases you use, things like the compliance tools, the tracking, but then also the ability to predict and regulate harm proactively before it happens. So not only through Aiba, but do you think there's a general move towards studios being more aware and trying to look after themselves before the harm happens? Is that part of the future, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. And I think also the part of the future is that the industry not only see this as a cost, but it's a competitive edge, that you actually have a community. Wow, you're so lucky. Please take care of it. Make sure it grows, make sure they're having a good time, because they will come back, bring their friends. So yeah, I think like proactively trying to work to make it much, much better, then you really will grow big and be successful, I think.
Amazing. And Richard, would you see more companies, not like DataTheorem, but generally in, say, cybersecurity or financial security or fraud security companies, begin to think, actually, maybe we can also begin helping mobile games? Think there's going to be a kind of a convalescence, if you like, of different industries using the kind of experience and technology they have to kind of support video games and mobile games particularly?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there are even companies that are in our space in the traditional side of what we do. I know some of them already have moved into this as well, and we are starting to see some emergence of that. And we're seeing existing, mobile solutions as well for gaming, right? They're adding those elements to their technologies, right? Now they're trying to say, hey, can we head this off where we already have something embedded, right? And start to identify that. So I think it's popping up everywhere now. The one thing that I've seen just as a trend that was interesting, we had a studio we started working with maybe 4 months ago, and in that period of time, they've tripled their security team, their security engineering team, right? Now they've grown very quickly in their reach and brand and all of that, but you had asked me that 4 years ago, I would have said that they don't even have a security team, right? Like that doesn't even exist. So I think all of these factors are going to drive something new to this space that traditionally just hasn't been there.
It's amazing. Well, I think we have only 20 seconds left. So, Oscar?
No, I mean, I love all this. I'm very old, and when I first joined games, I came out of working for an SAP consultancy, and prior to that, a pensions company. So I grew up with people. One of the guys I worked with was the guy that wrote the original Orange Book, which is one of the sort of primary, kind of sources for this stuff. So for me, it's been fascinating how the industry hasn't been talking about security. I mean, DDoS is a natural, normal thing that I think natural, normal. You know what I mean? It's going to happen. Man-in-the-middle attacks are going to happen, and we have been, I think, as an industry, kind of a sleepwalking, if anything. And the fact that we're now in a situation where we've got regulation, which is going to put the constraints on the smallest teams to hold the most private data, which in itself, in my opinion, I know Brian might, we'll probably have hours of conversation on this topic, but my view is that it's so naively written and so poorly done. But to your early point, right, as you started out, shouldn't we have been thinking about this stuff anyway? Shouldn't we have had an attitude of putting the players' needs, wants, security at the heart of what we do? Anyway, I'm waffling on because I happen to love this subject. Anyone else got any questions? Well, if there aren't, I mean, I'm going to say thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I hope you...